Hello, everybody. Hello, Billy.
All right, gentlemen, we are here on citations that were issued on February 24 of this year on 19th Street there, Watson Township. This is for too fast for conditions as well as failure to yield to emergency vehicle. These are civil infractions, Mr. Webb. You have a choice of what to do on them. You can, one, admit responsibility to a citation, or two, admit responsibility, but you'd like to provide some sort of explanation as to how or why this happened. Or three, you wish to contest the citation, in other words, to fight a ticket at what we call informal hearing. What were you looking to do?
I would like to contest this ticket.
Both?
Both of them,
violations? Yes. All right. Then, even though I cannot see you, I'd ask you to raise your right hand, same way the deputy's going to raise his right hand. You swear or affirm any testimony that you'd give here today would be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Webb, it makes a lot more sense for me to start with the deputy. He has the burden to establish to me why you were issued these citations in the first place. But then after that, you'll have an opportunity to either ask questions or testify on your own behalf. All right?
Okay.
And with that, deputy, you want to pick up the narrative somewhere it makes sense? Explain the issuing of this citation.
Conducting routine patrol in Watson Township. I was traveling westbound on 116th Avenue. I observed the defendant's vehicle driving directly ahead of me. While driving behind that vehicle, I paced it at 58 miles per hour for approximately 3 miles. Upon activation of my emergency lights, the vehicle continued driving for approximately a quarter mile before turning left onto 19th Street and coming to a stop. At that point, I made contact with the defendant, explained the reason of the stop, and issued the citation.
All right, Mr. Webb, what is it you wish to tell me?
I guess I'll just tell my story. I was on my way back from school because I forgot that it was spring break. When I got onto 222, I saw Mr. Kibbe sitting in like the little construction area across from the gas station. That's when I decided to flip him off. This obviously made Mr. Kibbe upset, prompting him to pull out behind me and begin following me for a few miles until I reached a downslope. I had my cruise control set at 57. So as soon as I hit that bottom of that downslope, my car accelerated a little bit, supposedly 1 mile an hour. And this is when Mr. Kibbe turned on his lights, and it was very obvious that he was targeting me. So I instantly, right away, started slowing down and decided that turning off to the left was going to be my best case scenario because it was going to put Officer Kibbe out of the main road, which I know is one of the leading causes of death for officers.
Deputy, what is the speed limit on this road?
55 miles per hour.
All right. So the too fast for conditions is the 58?
Correct.
And failure to yield to emergency vehicle is the driving for a quarter mile before he pulled over?
Correct. Your Honor, my understanding of the failing to yield for an emergency vehicle moving is that they have to pull immediately to the parallel to the road they're currently on. And in the event that I was heading to an emergency, he would have been impeding me by turning left across both lanes where I couldn't pass him.
Okay. Gentlemen, Mr. Webb, you know how dumb it is to needlessly upset law enforcement, right?
Yes, I know that.
Because they have certain powers that they can exercise over your life and make your life difficult. It was a dumb thing to do.
Yes, and I have stopped since then.
All right. Here's the problem. Violation of basic speed law, too fast for conditions, is essentially that's the wrong citation. You could have wrote him a citation for 1 to 5 over, and that's what he'd be looking at. But the violation of basic speed law is essentially when you have a slide off or something like that, you were going too fast for conditions. And that having the accident is the prima facie evidence that you should have been driving slower to sort of, avoid that happening, as opposed to just essentially a speeding ticket, meaning nothing happened with your vehicle, but a moving violation that you were in fact going faster than posted speed limit. So this could have been a faster than posted speed limit ticket, but the way it's written, a violation of basic speed law, we reserve that for a failure to maintain to your vehicle to stop a clear and assured distance before you hit something else or before you leave the roadway. The other problem is the failure to yield to emergency vehicle is this. Once an officer is trying to pull you over and it's obvious to you or reasonable to an objective person that the officer is trying to pull them over, i.e. lights and sirens, and there's nobody else but you, then you know that they're trying to pull you over. The issue with that is you do have the right to. Now, I'll tell you right now, if you just speed up and drive away, this turns very quickly into what's called fleeing and eluding, which is a felony crime, right? But if the officer's trying to pull you over, you are able to drive to a place that you feel is more conducive to a safe stop. A lot of times what that means, gentlemen, I'm just explaining to you this so you understand this. A lot of time what that means is, oh, it was late at night, it's a country road in the middle of nowhere, and I know there's a gas station, a quarter mile up the road. So I, put my blinkers on, or I drove 35 miles an hour, but I drove all the way to the gas station because I'd rather have this interaction take place in the lighted parking lot, or something like what Mr. Webb is explaining, that 222 is a lot busier than, say, pulling off to a lesser used road. So provided the fact that you only went a quarter mile is the sort of saving grace here, and that you did pull over, but the way that you explained it, there is what I would say a grace period there for pulling over, as long as what you're doing is pulling over to what you consider to be a safer, either for you or for the officer. The way you articulated it, really, you articulated it for the officer, but it's allowed to be for your safety. But that is not necessarily what this statute, failure to yield to emergency vehicle, is written for. That would be essentially, more often what that is not listening to the officer, not a delay in listening to the officer. The delay of listening to officer is a little more subjective, i.e. I get to listen to it, but it's my interpretation here, or my understanding, that you drove at the speeds you were normally driving to go a quarter mile down the road, turn left, and then pull over, sort of right away once you got off the busier road. I wouldn't find either of these two actions to be violations of the statutes that you were written for. But like I said, gentlemen, it's pretty clear here, Mr. Webb, what you did. You used really bad judgment that normally is going to end up costing you money, right? And costing you points on your driver's license, because it's just a dumb thing to do. Don't do it again.
Okay.
All right. But I would not find you responsible on these citations as they're written. We're all set with this today, gentlemen. So.
All right, thank you.
Go our separate ways and think twice about how we carry ourselves in the world, all right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, just as Zoom user, I'm assuming you are Mr. Bishop?
I am, yep.
All right. This is a citation that was issued on February 23rd of this year on the US 131 in Otsego Township. This is for careless driving. Mr. Bishop, you're here on this citation to do one of three things. First is you could admit responsibility to the citation, or two, admit responsibility, but you'd like to provide some sort of explanation as to how or why this happened. Or three, you wish to contest this citation. In other words, fight the ticket at what we call informal hearing. What were you looking to do?
Contest, please.
All right. The first thing I'm going to do then is swear you both in. You want to raise your right hand. Swear or affirm any testimony that you give here today would be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Bishop, it makes a lot more sense for me to start with the deputy. He has the burden to establish to me why you were issued these citations in the first place. But then after that, you'll have an opportunity to either ask questions or testify on your own behalf. All right?
Okay.
And with that, Deputy, you want to pick up the narrative somewhere it makes sense, explain the issuing of the citation.
Yes, sir. I was working as a certified police officer on February 23rd, just prior to 7:41 p.m. Officer Green from the Gun Lake Tribal Police had a subject in custody and had ramped on at the exit or mile marker 61 southbound from the casino. Upon entering the highway, he got behind a 2024 Chevy Silverado. During this incident, Officer Green did call out the license plate of DE85695 that was attached to this vehicle and continued following it. While Officer Green was following this vehicle, he called out to dispatch that he believed he was behind an intoxicated driver based off the driving of this vehicle. Officer Green noted that he believed the driver was intoxicated. He stated to dispatch that the vehicle was unable to maintain speed, unable to maintain lanes, and almost sideswiped another vehicle, causing a crash on the highway. Due to this information, Officer Green continued to follow the vehicle until I was able to get into position to conduct a traffic stop on this vehicle. Officer Green had a subject in custody, so he was not able to. I sat at the 116th on-ramp in Martin, waiting for them to get in that area. Once I was notified by Officer Green that the vehicle had passed the off-ramp, I then got on the on-ramp and was able to ramp on directly behind the vehicle that Officer Green described. I did match the license plate with the make and model of the vehicle. Officer Green continued to follow me in this vehicle, even though he had somebody in custody. But Officer Green felt the driving was so egregious that he needed to divert from the direct route to jail to ensure that somebody got behind this vehicle. Once I got behind this vehicle, I observed the same driving. The driver also continued to swerve lanes, crossing both yellow and white lines, unable to maintain speed. At this point, I did make a determination that I was going to stop this vehicle for its poor driving, and I was waiting for a safer portion of the highway with no guardrails, curves, or hills. And while I was doing this, the vehicle was in the left-hand lane, drifted into the right-hand lane a significant amount, almost striking an additional vehicle. At this time, I did activate my emergency overhead lights due to this driving. It should be noted that this pattern of driving was witnessed by law enforcement for over 10 miles of roadway. I'm activating my emergency overhead lights. The Silverado pulled to the right shoulder and came to a stop. I then made contact with the driver, who identified himself with a Michigan driver's license as being Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop was requested to get out of the vehicle, which he did comply. As I was talking to Bishop and informed him of the poor driving, that two officers believed he was intoxicated, he almost struck two separate vehicles. And again, a pattern of poor driving that was for over 10 miles. I asked him about that, and he stated that he was looking at the phones that his children, who were also in the vehicle, had. So based off of the extended period of bad driving, almost causing multiple crashes, and having children in the car, he advised he was looking at their phones, and that was the cause of the pattern of bad driving. Mr. Bishop was then cited for careless driving and released from the scene.
I just wish to clarify one thing, Deputy. Officer Green's observations were speed changes, lane problems, and almost one accident. You clearly testified you noticed the same problems, an almost accident and lane problems. Did you also notice speed problems, speed changes?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry if I didn't mention that.
And you may have. I wanted to be clear when you said you saw the same issues. You saw all the same issues I had written down. Officer Green had noticed.
Failure to maintain a consistent speed.
All right.
Well,
thank you, Mr. Bishop. What is it you'd like to tell me?
That I'm not denying those things. My kids were on the phone. My daughter was on the phone with looking at funny dog videos, and my other son was on the iPad trying to do his homework, and I was just trying to help with that. I don't drink and drive whatsoever. I never have. I don't even drink at all in my entire life. You can also look at my driving record that doesn't have accidents, doesn't have tickets. Maybe a speeding ticket. Other than that, a good driving record. I was more or less wondering, because I own multiple businesses, and they are attached to driving insurance, multiple company trucks. I understand that there's got to be a ticket, and I realize that. But more seeing if it could get pleaded down to where it's not careless, that affects all my insurances, all my trucks and drivers and all that kind of stuff.
So, sir, you're not contesting the citation.
No, I do.
You're
I do
asking for a break.
Yeah, I also have an issue with the careless part of it. I mean, I knew that he was behind me so far up my rear end that I couldn't see his tail lights. I didn't know it was a cop. I was also trying to get over, but also,
Okay.
with the kids and stuff like
Mr.
that.
Bishop, let me explain some things to you just to put things in context, right? Officer Green has someone in custody in his patrol car. You heard that part, right?
Yes, I did.
Now, what he has is an obligation to go to the jail. And anything he does besides going to the jail now opens up him, meaning Officer Green, that he could get in trouble, that he could get in that they could be sued for $1 million if what he does is do something besides take the person he has in custody to the jail, right? So that's why, first things first, this officer, the first officer, not even Deputy Murphy, the first officer thought that what you were doing was of such concern to public safety that he then decided he was not going back to jail even though he had that person in custody, right? So if Officer Green gets in an accident and that person in the backseat gets hurt, they could sue the county for millions of dollars because Officer Green made a decision that following you was now more important than taking his guy back to jail. That's based on how poorly you were driving, right? Then we have another deputy, because essentially what happened is Officer Green can't pull you over, and so he calls in calls in Deputy Murphy. Deputy Murphy could pull you over without ever seeing you do anything wrong and giving you the same ticket just based off of what the first officer observed. But that's not even what happened. Officer Murphy observed all the same problems, including an almost accident, which is a different almost accident than Officer Green observed. And they weren't just doing this for a flash in the pan. Oh, I looked at the one funny thing. I looked at the thing on the iPod. Ha, ha, ha. It was fun. For 10 miles, which means you're doing it over and over again. So let me tell you, as far as whether or not you should have a careless ticket, you certainly should have a careless ticket. And just to be clear, I do find you responsible on the careless ticket. Let me tell you what else you should have got. You should have got a citation for using a phone while driving, because even if it's not your phone, you can't be looking at someone else's phone to look at whatever funny meme or thing is on their phone while you're driving. That's a $200 ticket right there. That's not even a moving violation. It's just an extra $200. Now, that's if you're driving down the road, driving this poorly, looking at your phone. That's not what's happening. You have your own kids in the car, and this is what's happening. So not only could it have been careless driving, which is just a ticket, could have been reckless driving, which is a crime. And I'm telling you, all day long as a prosecutor, I would prosecute you for reckless driving, that you had your children in the car, and that for 10 miles, this is the behavior that's observed not once, but twice by 2 different officers. Thirdly, because your children are in the car and you're driving this poorly, that's actually conducive to child abuse. You could have got charged with putting a child in a situation where physical harm to the child was a likely or expected outcome, i.e., if you say this, I give it to you, you don't drink and drive, but you're having all the same issues that someone who did choose to drink and drive is having. If you are OWI, driving poorly, and your kids are in the car, do you know how much more trouble you get in than if it's just you driving?
Yep.
And essentially, we could take alcohol out of the situation, but it's almost even worse because you don't have the excuse that that's the reason why you're making poor choices. You were soberly making really poor decisions with your kids in the car on it. Now, it's also different if this is 2 in the morning and there's nobody on the road and maybe you're swerving a little, but that's not it. 7:41 on a main thoroughfare to the point where you're almost having accidents. A long story short, I understand what you're saying, and that the consequences for this are going to be unfortunate, but at least you should have got a careless driving ticket for what happened this evening, and that's what I would find. Now, because you had a contested hearing, you do have a right to say, I don't agree with what happened there. I don't think I should have been found responsible on careless, and that you could take this to formal hearing in front of the district court judges with the prosecutor's office. But in order to do that, you must do 2 things. One is you must ask for that within 7 days of today's date. Your window of opportunity to contest this further closes after 7 days. And 2, you must come in and ask for that in writing. You can't just call and say, hey, I want a formal hearing. All right. Do you understand your rights on appeal?
Yep.
All right. Then we are all set for what we need to do here today. I'm going to go ahead and release parties.
Be safe, be well, sleep sweet, and much love.